Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Your Money, Your Life podcast. We're at episode 232. It's the dog days of summer. The weather is hot, but we're episode 232. And every week we do this. You make sure you like, subscribe, 5-star rate, and review the podcast. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the notification bell. You'll know when we drop a new episode, and you can comment, like, subscribe there as well. Let's jump right into our dog days of summer episode and give you guys a little bit of taste of what's going on. First and foremost, let's look at what's going on with inflation. Inflation, we've talked about it for the last few months, more than the last few months. It's been this topic and theme for a while now because we're waiting to see if the Fed's policies are taking shape to cool inflation, and it looks like they are. So CPI is one of the key price gauges to show what inflation is doing. It cooled more than expected in June. So the U.S. Consumer Price Index rose at an annual rate, so on an annual basis of 3%, down from 3.3% in May. Remember, the Fed's target's 2%. So they're getting closer to that target. Remember when the CPI was 8%, 6%, 7% back over a year ago? And now this is cooled to a much, much more acceptable area. So if you look at the expectations that there was, so on the basis of that 8%, um, that report added evidence to the federal chairs, Jerome Powell. He said it's needed. This evidence is needed for the bank to start to lowering rates. So the Fed chair is looking for this evidence if they're going to start lowering rates, which we've also talked about. So that was a really, really huge for us people to see. Let's break down the numbers from this LinkedIn user in a more detailed fashion. Used car truck prices down 10.1%. New cars and truck prices down 0.9%. Food did increase at 2.2%. Gasoline 2.5, electricity 4.4, clothing, excuse me, gasoline down 2.5, electricity up 4.4, clothing up a little under 1%, medical care and transportation services up handily. So this is the breakdown, the niches buckets that they look at when they're looking at CPI. So on a month-to-month basis, it was down 0.1%. So month over month, the CPI was down 0.1%, 1/10 of a percent. So again, good numbers. At least it's not, trending in the opposite direction. It's not being flat. It's cooling, which is actually really, really incredible to see that potentially the Fed's moves are actually working. So on a monthly basis, we said 0.1% dip, 12-month, 3%. Core CPI, 0.1% monthly, 3.3% annually. This is beating expectations. So again, all these numbers were beating expectations that we saw for um, economists for the CPI rate. So if you look at it from the standpoint of the market, the last 5 days have been really, really strong. The market is eating up what's going on with inflation, the fact that we have slowed the economy down, but we haven't pulled it to a grinding halt, which is bit key when they talk about if we're ever going to have a soft landing, which is not common, but it looks like we're getting closer to that point. On a month basis, up 5%. And we see the futures are roughly flat today. So the market's probably priced in a decent amount of these numbers, it seems like, and they're not making a huge move so far in the futures market today. And if you can think overall on what the market's been doing, that's kind of the big things so far. So we're watching the market closely to see if there's a reaction to today's CPI numbers. But it's really have reacted the past week, past month, the past 6 months, and year to date. The market's been really, really strong. So for those that have been, following the plan of investing for long term, that's why you do this, right? If you day trade, your percentages go way, way down. But that's, again, people's prerogative to do so. And if you look at some more news, I actually saw this story and it was interesting about Spotify wanting to be a social app. So Spotify has added commenting to its podcast. I actually love this. A step toward becoming a social network centered around all things audio, not just music streaming. This is according to TechCrunch. This follows an update last year that added a TikTok-inspired discovery feed, artist profiles with concert tickets and merch sales, and interactive features like polls and Q&As. So Spotify is moving more to that social app versus having just a music platform. They want to be now a social app, which I actually kind of like the idea. If you think about it, it's a place where people go often to listen to music, do different things. That's what I use. I think a lot of people use Apple. Some people use Spotify. I use Spotify. And that this to me makes sense. This to me makes a lot of sense on the move they're making here to move towards more of a social app versus just an app that you can listen to music on. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm going to be watching that closely. And more news, airline news. I like seeing what's going on with the airlines. Delta. So Delta, despite a record summer travel, Delta reported earnings and they said things are not so great. So they revealed they expect to miss Wall Street's estimates on profit and revenue in the third quarter. Second quarter, their profit fell 29% from a year earlier. So from a year earlier, this they just reported second quarter earnings. Their profit fell 29% from the same period in 2023. The main problem was increased competition during the business summer traveling period, pushing many airlines to slash ticket prices to stay competitive. So they have so many people wanting to go places and so much competition out there, which surprises me. I don't know. Is there competition with airlines increasing? Like, how do you, there's not, you can't just like start an airline. If you're talking about a barrier to entry, that's like really, really tough. Um, so the airline is facing high fixed cost, including 500 more annual on labor after boosting employee pay in early June. So of course, remember with the holdouts that we saw from all over the place, union strikes, worker strikes, that increased pay packages for people. Of course, it increased the pay, increased the cost the airlines have to pay to run their business. And of course, that made profits fall. So that was one of the reasons why profits fell, apparently, along with slashing prices. So that's interesting news. And does that sound? I think people are still traveling, but it seems like the competition is heated up for airlines, and it's not just a one-stop shop or a couple stop shops for people. There's so many options that it's making it tricky for them to maintain customers there, market share. So we'll keep watching the airlines. I thought that was interesting. It's not tax time, but the Treasury IRS announced major milestones of 1 billion in past due taxes collected from millionaires. So the Treasury Department and the IRS announced the collection of more than 1 billion in tax debt from high-income individuals over the past year. In September, the IRA announced plans to expand its scrutiny of those making more than a million annually with more than 250 in recognized tax debt. However, the funding enacted in 2020 that allowed the IRS to pursue its plans still has its critics, particularly among congressional Republicans. So they're pretty much saying they bolstered the IRS Treasury to try to cover more ground. If you've ever called into taxes or done anything with the IRS, the taxes or government in general, it's usually slow. They don't have enough workers. Very not the best experience. But they tried to cut that by boosting funding so they can one have better service, two be able to find and detect and collect more revenue dollars. And so that's what their tax revenue dollars. And so that's what they've been focused on. It looks like they've had a significant milestone of 1 billion in back taxes collected from people making more than $1 million a year. And so for those people, you people are probably like, well, how is it back taxes? What didn't it just withhold from the check? Most of the time, when you're seeing someone that's making over that amount or making a good amount of money, they're usually a business owner, self-employed, or something of that nature, which allows them to collect their money and pay the taxes later, right? They report what they make and they pay the tax later. So that's where you'll see a lot of times where there's tax debt owed versus if you're someone that works in a W-2, your taxes are usually already withheld from your paycheck, right? So you have, you get money back at the end of the year, right? Versus someone else in this case. So that's an interesting point to see. And also interesting point to learn about what could potentially happen there. So we'll keep an eye on that. In more stock news, we talked about the inflation rate, the S&P 500, Dow. The S&P 500 is at highs, and it's been a strong start to the year, first half of the year, as we kind of suspected. I didn't expect it to be this strong. We'll see if it continues. I do think we'll see a choppy summer. And then to the fall, we'll see, to the fall to the end of the year, another strong half, third back quarter of the year in the fourth quarter. So that's the prediction. I didn't expect us to get double digits, but I did say we would be green, and it looks like we are so far. But again, it's long-term investing. You never know when the pullbacks and corrections will come, especially during summer times when traders, investors, a lot of people go on vacation. So we'll see what happens in that regard. Let's move on. If there's any other stories that I found particularly interesting for people. I don't think there was. Saks Fifth Avenue bag rivals Neiman Marcus bags rival Neiman Marcus for 2.6 billion. So Saks Fifth Avenue is buying Neiman Marcus for 2.6 billion to take on luxury direct to consumer boom. So Saks Fifth Avenue is adding a new chain to its bag. Saks' partner HBC said it will buy rival Neiman Marcus for 2.6 B. which also owns Bergdorf Goodman, and they're two of the U.S. oldest department store chains with nearly 80 combined locations. Okay, so big acquisition that you haven't seen much acquisition in the last couple of years. This one's a huge one. Retailers combining acquisition happening in the retail world. You're not seeing much, but that's good to know that there's still a little bit going on out there. Crypto leans into US presidential election bets as the market goes all in. Interesting. Okay. There's nothing else much, folks, that I thought we missed. Let's move into a question I thought was interesting. I was talking to a client, and I was talking to people just in general, and they were wondering how to know when their business is profitable. That seems really, you know, intuitive, but some people lack, all the knowledge in business, and so they won't really be sure, especially if they're using high fixed costs, doing a bunch of things. They're not doing great at bookkeeping to know what their actual earned income is at the end of the whatever period they're looking at. So how do you actually know when your business is profitable? You're putting the money in, you're investing into it. Do you know if you're actually getting a return on investment? So, of course, in the technical sense, as long as your income exceeds your expenses, you're a profitable business. So now you can have different desired net profit margins, right? Net profit margins, and then ideally, profits are going to be vary depending on your industry, but a gross profit margin of 50 to 70% is obviously really, really high. And a lot of fixed cost businesses, they're going to be a lot lower. If you run a low fixed cost business, like an online business, they could be even higher than that, right? Like I've said many times that our profit of a business like mine that's primarily online is pretty much 100%, right? And so you're going to see the differences in income, cost to run the business, actual net income, right? And so take that net income number, divide it by the revenue number, it gives you a good gauge there. So, if you're running a business, one thing you want to know is that you make profits. Are you actually making profits in said business? So that's a big thing to just keep your eye on, keep your focus on. And the best way to do that, there's only two ways you can make more. As you saw in the airlines example, they had to slash prices, or you can um, really cut expenses. How do you cut expenses? Is there a way to do so? Is there a way to pay someone less? Is there a way to pay a fixed cost less? Is there a way to cut an unneeded expense out? That's the same way you look at it in your personal finances, right? You can either get a new job, get a promotion, earn more, or you could figure out a way to lower expenses. Could you cut something out that's not needed, that you usually paid for monthly? That's the same methodology there. So just something to keep your eye on is making sure you're cash flowing and doing a good job of said cash flowing. So that's what we have today, folks. A quick one, an intuitive one, hopefully one that was helpful and you learned something from it. But we'll be doing this every week. The schedule in the back half of this month and early next month again. I think I've updated people. It's gonna be touch and go, as I'll be gone out. I might try to record just to make sure people have something to listen to in the weeks that I'm out of office. But of course, we'll keep it going. Make sure you reach out to me if anything's needed. For the clients, we've had such great interactions. People loving what New Shoot is doing. We'll keep it going, and we'll talk to you soon.